Hi, and welcome to this introductory webinar on getting started with Wix Studio. I'm Aaron from the Wix Studio team. We've built this webinar for those of you primarily using Editor X with the focus of helping you better understand the basics of the platform. In this walkthrough, our product expert Sebi will be taking you through the steps to create a live website. First, we'll start off with an overview of the Wix Studio editor, and then we'll take a look at how to structure your site. We'll cover out-of-the-box responsive behaviors in the editor, plus we'll demonstrate the new capabilities of layouting tools like Stack, Grid, and Repeater. And finally, we'll go over all the new animations and effects. The design we're going to create is based on a live site. So if you want to refer back to it as we go along and see the end results of each step, you can find it at katemanilou.com. Remember, this webinar is just the tip of the iceberg in the world of Wix Studio. So if you're looking to dive deeper into the capabilities of the platform, then make sure to check out our educational hub, Wix Studio Academy, to find how-to guides, webinars, and a full-length essential course, and a ton of other great content. Also, make sure to join our forum to find answers, get product updates, and create potential collabs. You can share your code and design inspiration, plus see all the cool stuff made by the community. So sign up and come say hi over at forum.wixstudio.com. Okay, and with all that out of the way, let's get started. So enough from me. Sebi, let's hand this over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Aaron. Hi, everyone. I'm Sebi from the Academy team. Now, it's a really great honor to be here to teach you guys about the new Wix Studio. As a former Editor X user, I really found great use of all the new features that really helped me speed up my work process while building a website. Now, today, as Aaron said, we're going to be rebuilding a website using Wix Studio. You can find this website by going to katemanilou.com. Now, as you may have guessed, this website is fully responsive. As we scale down all the way from desktop to tablet and mobile, you will see that the design will adapt to my screen. Now, in this website, we're going to be building different types of layouts and using different types of tools. A lot of the tools you're familiar with from Editor X, and some tools are going to be new. A lot of the tools are meant to help you speed up your work process and get a better workflow and build sites faster. Also, there's some tools related to interactions, as you can see here, as I scroll, that this image will reveal itself according to my scroll position. You will also find other features like this text, which is running a ticker, basically a loop animation as we call it, that we'll be building throughout the course of this webinar. Now, with this out of the way, let's go ahead and open up the editor and see what it looks like. Great. So, for many of you, this seems very familiar to what you would expect on Editor X, but there are a lot of new things here. So we're going to talk about each individual thing, so that way we all get used to the new platform. First things first is we still have this nice, beautiful canvas where it's very easy to work and drag and drop the elements that you want to put into place. First things first, if we resize this, you can see that it actually hops back to its place. You would remember that on Editor X actually would stay. In this case, it hops back. This is because we introduced this new feature called editing size. Editing size, you can actually find the value here, which is, in this case for desktop, we have 1,280 pixels. What does the editing size mean? Well, what we're actually doing is we're setting a specific size in which this breakpoint will be edited at. And this value is very important because it will help us later on build a really great scaling website without having to do any math. So we'll see later on where the value really comes in place. Now, important part about this value, if you feel more comfortable with editing on a smaller screen or larger screen, you can always edit this value. For example, I can go ahead and just put 1001, which is the smallest value of the desktop. But in this case, let's go back to our default 1280 and work with there. Now, on the breakpoints, we still have all the ranges for breakpoints, but each breakpoint still has its own editing size. If you were to add a new breakpoint, it would also have its unique editing size. So it's very important to get accustomed to this concept because it's going to be very, very helpful for us as we build our website. I'm just going to add a section here. Great. Now, on the left-hand side, we're going to see that we have all the components we used to have on the top bar. We now have them on the left. We have our add panel. We can find all the different elements that we're used to from Editor X, including, our business solutions here. We also will find the CMS has an entry point here. We can see also it's here as well. We're going to be using the CMS later on, so it's important to know where it's at. Now, in the add panels, you can also find what we call sections. Sections in Editor X used to be called compositions. Sections are pre-built designs built from scratch inside the editor and then saved as an asset for you to reuse later on. So you can actually apply these to your site. Let's just say, for example, this section. You can actually click on each element and really see how it's built. That way you can rebuild the same design or a similar design and just, get more knowledge this way. I really think it's a really great opportunity to learn. It's just by looking at what the pros have been doing. Great. Here we still have our pages panel. The layers panel is still the same. It represents our structure on the page and relationship between elements. So we're going to be using it later on. In site styles, we have a new tool. Actually, we can go to each heading and actually set it to scale. I can go here and just say this is supposed to scale. It will add an asterisk here to the value. We'll talk about what the asterisk does later on, but you can see that it's per heading. It's not all the different text needs to be added. And the important part about this is now when I go and add a new text on my page, it's going to automatically be set to scale. So it's a really great tool to use in order to speed up your process as well. Here's our app market, and then here we have our code if you have developer mode enabled. Now, on the right-hand side, we have our very useful inspector. In the inspector, we'll find a lot of different new features that really help us speed up our workflows and save us time and not have to do all the math of responsive design that typically is involved with this type of design. Now, we also will find that there's a new size options here, and we'll talk about that in a moment when we start building. So let's go ahead and start by adding some elements to the page. At first, we're going to add our text from here. We're just going to drag and drop it into place here. Now, something right out of the way that you will notice as we're editing this text is as I resize this, it will start to scale. This is because we've set it up this way, so it's easier for you to really edit the font size and not have to be guessing a value and then checking it. It's so much easier to just set up the size that you want on the canvas and then let the editor itself set the value for you. Now, as we're resizing, it actually is adjusting the value of this text. First things first, in the inspector, we can see that it has a responsive behavior of scale proportionally. These responsive behaviors that you see here are actually representing a lot of different types of presets that we have for this specific component. Different components may have different responsive behaviors. It really depends on which one you're editing. In this case, we have it set to scale proportionally, which if we scroll down here, we can see our font size right now is 1112. As I resize here, you'll see that it grows with our resizing of the text. Now, what is this value? Why does it say 1120 pixels with the asterisk? Well, the asterisk is telling us it's a converted pixel is the term that we use. And what it does is actually calculating the value based off of our editing size. When our editing size changes, this font size will also change as well. So let's go ahead and add the text that we want to use here. Okay. Okay, there we go. So now we have Cape Manilu. Perfect. We're going to copy paste because we're going to reuse another text here. And our goal here is we're going to try to not use any sort of math here. Okay, great. So we're going to just paste this here. And we're just going to resize. Let's do this. We're just going to try to paste it from here. it will just resize by itself. There we go. Okay, I think this is a good size for us. Now, as you may have guessed it, because this is set to scale proportionally, when I scale down, it will scale proportionally. You can see it will go all the way down from tablet to mobile. It continues to scale all the way down. So it's a really great feature to really build a quick, easy, responsive design. And you can pretty much design, prototype, and build the website all at once here. Now, let's talk about the size here. So in here, we can see we have a new values called X and Y. These values actually represents the distance away from the top left corner of the parent container of this element. Now, we still have the docking that you may recall from Editor X. Here we can see we have 17% and 8%. Now, if you recall percent is actually taking a percent of the total parent's value and basically, giving that as a percentage, basically. So if we have 100 in pixels, 8% is only 8 pixels. Now, the reason why we're using percent here is because the preset scale proportion is automatically setting this up. So in most cases, when you're setting things to scale proportion, you don't really need to be so aware about what the docking, because this X and Y will really help you position things correctly. And as I mentioned earlier, for the width, for the font size, is that the value is in proportion to the editing size that we're working with. In the width, we have the same idea. Right now, our editing size is 1280. So if I put this as 1280, what's going to happen is that it's going to actually fit 100% of the screen. So you can see here, it fits right perfectly here. This is because, again, the idea here is that we're calculating the value based off the editing size. We still have access to our advanced sizing from responsive units, that you're probably used to. And you can see here that the width is automatically set to 100%. So it's really cool because I'm setting up a value here based off this, the size of the screen that I'm editing on, but the system in the background is automatically calculating the different units and different sizes based off the package I'm using. So I can even continue editing here, right? I can go to 80% here, but you will see something that when I put 80%, it's still connected to my package and the width also adjusts. So it's really cool because it's, you're able to kind of switch between the two modes and really get the most out of it and get the behavior you want. You can also use a few other behaviors, right? Maybe fix you're used to, which basically just means that it will stay the same size, no matter what. So it's not great for this particular design. Hug mode will actually hug the text, the top and bottom of the container holding the text will actually hug the text. Now it's not set to scale proportionally automatically, but you can always enable scale text. In this case, I can click here on scale text. And you will see that now it's set to scale. And when I scale down again, it will scale. Now you can see here, when we go to scale text, we have two different options. We have auto and custom. In auto, we're using the new system, the new logic for scaling the text, which makes it in proportion to our editing size. When we're using the custom, we're using the old system used from Editor X, where we basically set a high value and a low value, and it will create a range between these two values of the font sizes. Now, another thing about the font sizes is we can also set a maximum and a minimum. So what does this mean? Let's just say I don't want this to be larger than 30 pixels. So I can go ahead and put 30 pixels here, and that's going to be my size for now. So you can see that it will keep it as 30 pixels as my maximum value. Still, if we go to mobile, it can get smaller than 30 because I set only a maximum of 30. In this case, let's put just maybe 40 pixels just for the maximum. There we go. Great, so we're going to keep this here. And now let's go ahead and just continue editing just a bit. Now, one of the things we're missing is our header. We can find the headers are in the global sections. We can save reusable sections. So previously, you may have remembered the term being called master sections, but now we renamed it to global sections. Also, the panel has a lot easier of an interface to use. I can just click here to add my new header here. Now we have our new header. I can remove our old header by going to remove page here. And then that's it. Now we have our new header in the place, and we can continue editing from there. Now it's important to remember that we can set any section to global section and reuse it across multiple pages just by clicking on this here. So let's go ahead and add some media to the screen. We're gonna go here, click on show more. All right, so now we have our video in place. Let's go ahead and drag it on top. We can just play around with it. Again, the value is in proportion to this value, so we can always change it, resize it, play around with it. You can also see when we go to responsive behavior that there's a few different options, right? We have relative width, we have stretch. Relative width, as you may have guessed it basically, it's in relation to the parent instead of in relation to the editing size. So if I was to go to advanced sizing, we would see here that we have a width set up here and the height is fixed. So now the video could get cropped. So in general, this is a video, so I don't want it to get cropped or, the aspect ratio to change. So I'm going to set it back to scale proportionally. And that's it. Now let's add our second video. Let's go here. We're going to paste it right about here. And we're going to just add it. Okay. There we go. Great. So we're going to drop it right into place here. We're going to just drag it just a bit. And we're going to right click, select bring to front for the section, because we're going to do this kind of cool effect where the sections kind of blend with each other. And then we're going to go ahead and go into color. Let's set up a new color here. We'll set up a new color. Right, there we go. And now all we're missing is we have this header that I actually wanted to overlay itself on top of this bottom section. So let's go ahead and just do that for now. And what we can do is we can go to position. And you may recall that on headers, typically when you set it to fixed, on EditorX, we actually use pinned as the term because we can pin elements and different things to different sections and containers. So let's go ahead and just click on pinned, and this will automatically collapse the section onto, or overlay the section as a proper term to use here. Overlay the section on top of the first hero section. We can just maybe make this a bit larger. And maybe we can move this down. Now, I haven't used any containers. I've resized everything just pretty much by eye, right? I can continue resizing here to play around with it and get it to the perfect position that I want, right? It's very cool because now we can just do sizing based off of the actual canvas, and we don't need to be doing a lot of math anymore. Great. So we have this now laid up correctly, and let's see what it looks like on tablet and mobile. When I go to the tablet and mobile, we can already start to see that it's it's looking really great on tablet, and on mobile it's also looking okay. We're gonna make some changes soon. Last things last, we're gonna add a last component, which is our button. Now, throughout the course of this webinar, we're going to be using our site assets. For those of you not familiar with site assets, it's basically you can save a library and reuse it across multiple projects and even share it with other team members or collaborators. So the cool thing about this is that you can save any type of component, click on Save as Asset, even a section, a component, whatever you need, and reuse it. Now, for this webinar, because we only have 1 hour, we're going to be using this quite a bit, but it's just meant to be so that we can show you as much as we can. So I'm adding this button here. And something you may have guessed about the button in comparison to the other elements is that this button is not going to scale so much. Why? Well, because in general, it's a button, and the space we have around is not as much, right? It's a very tight component, and we want to make sure that, the button does not get, affected by the screen becoming so small that the text then is unreadable. So that's it. Now we have our components. If we go ahead and go to tablet, we can see what it looks like. Great. So what do we want to do here? Well, we might want to make a few changes on our tablet. If you recall how basically breakpoints work in terms of between the different different designs between different breakpoints, I got a little bit twisted there. You will remember that basically anything that I set up on my desktop will automatically cascade down between my desktop to tablet to mobile. Now, what does this mean? Any type of design changes I make on desktop will be applied. But what about if I make a change on my tablet? Well, if I make a change on my tablet, it's going to apply only to my tablet and to the smaller breakpoint of mobile. So let's go ahead and see this in action. Maybe we want this to be hidden. Maybe it's a bit too much. There's not as much space. So we can right click on this element, select don't display. It's going to automatically hide here. We can then grab this button, drag it all the way to the right. Maybe we have this pink line on the left-hand side that lines it to the containers here. We can then drag this here. You can play around with the values a bit, try to get, the size that we want. We can always resize the text as well. But I think in this case for a tablet, it's okay. Now, when we go back to desktop, it's not affected. When we go to mobile, it got the new design now. So we can then grab this, move it down a bit. This text is a bit, too much, too high. Let's try to see if we can right click on top of it and select layer. And we're going to just move it down just a bit. I'm just using my keyboard here to drag it down because we have it, the header overlaying on top of it. We are going to go ahead and just drag this down. 1 second, and we'll fix it in a moment. Now, there we go. And then maybe you can see that it got a bit, things are a bit, large here. And one of the tricks I have in order to make this, this box sort of hug and still scale, you can click on hug here and it will hug it. And then you can go ahead and go to scale proportionally again and it will go back. Now you can see it's out of the frame. Maybe we can just fix it real quickly by putting 0. Because it was pushed all the way to the right because of the new breakpoint, but it's okay. We can just put it there. We can resize it just a bit. I think the size is a bit too much. Right, there we go. And then we'll drag this video down a bit, maybe down here. Make it just a bit bigger. And there we go. Now, what are we missing? Well, we don't have the button here. Now recall how I added the element from our assets. Well, the cool thing about the assets is that it will save all the properties you have from before. So I've actually set up this button to not show on mobile. All the components that are hidden, for example, the video we hid earlier, are still visible on our layers panel. I can always just click here, display, and it will add it back to our page here. So we can always just go ahead and do that. We're going to maybe use here and just make this a bit higher again. Okay. Move it down a bit. And we can just put our button here in the center. And maybe move the video up. So this is the cool thing about this editor. You can start playing around with it. You don't need to be so worried about putting the right values in order to kind of figure out what is the right value I need for this design. Oops, I shouldn't have done that because I accidentally added a section only on mobile. So it's not a good idea for right now. Great. So now we have our design for desktop, tablet, and then mobile. And you can see how they all have a unique design. And you can always just make things scale and customized very easily. Now, I'm going to add a section below just because I always like to work with a little bit of breathing room here. And we're going to add our second section now. We're going to go ahead and just make a dark background. And for our second section, we're going to be using a few components. We're going to be putting 3 components. And we're going to be using a new type of layout tool that is an update from our stack. Now, if you recall, all elements positions are relative to their parent. You can see here the blue dotted lines represents the distance away from the top and right from the parent, in this case, top left. As we move it around, our system will automatically relay out, the element based off of its position. Now, very important about this is this means that there's no relationship between the position of this circle and this text. So in some cases, maybe the space between them can grow or, may change a bit. So if we want to keep it consistent, we can always multi-select elements and select to stack. When you select to stack, it will put it inside of a container that has this blue shaded area inside. I can always just click on here. Oops, it's covering our text right now. Okay, well, we can see the same value here where we have 40 pixels with the asterisk, and we can customize it, right? We can say 10 pixels with the asterisk, and this will change the amount of space we have between it. Now, this is something new. If you're used to Editor X, in Editor X, we could only do vertical stacks. What about if we want to add an additional new stack here, element to the stack that is actually below the two elements, right? We have now a horizontal stack. What if we want something right below? So let's go ahead and just resize here just a bit. We're going to move this right into place. We're going to have this here. Let's make sure everything is set up correctly. And something important you can always do is you have the option here in the inspector to align items. So they just put them right in the center of each other. And we need to make sure we're clicking on the right item. We're going to put it right about here. Multi-select this text. And now we get the option to stack again. So now we have a horizontal stack and then inside of a vertical stack. So it's a very, very useful thing to do. Let's just try to click on the layer below, which is our stack. Great. Something I noticed is that we have a bit of distance from the left-hand side. We can always just align it by clicking on our value here, and that's it. We're fixed there. Now we also have some values here we can play around with. Let's go ahead and just change our item spacing. In this case, we're using percent. So let's go ahead and just put 3. If you recall, percent basically takes a percent from the parents as well. So that's it. Now, important thing about this text is actually scaling proportionally. We actually are using the old type of scale. So I'm going to actually put auto scale. So it's going to scale based off of our screen size here. Our editing size, sorry. As we scale all the way down, you can see that it's looking okay, but then it has a few issues. So what can we do in this case? On mobile, well, it's a bit tight here. It's just almost touching the edges or touching the edges on the top. So you have two options here. We need to create some space. There's two options in how we create space on a responsive site. We can either add space by going here to the margin of the element inside and saying, right, let's put 5% here, and it will automatically add 5% here. And then we can also put maybe 5% on the top. Oops, let's go ahead and just click on here. I made a mistake. There we go. So we can just go here, put 5% here. There we go. So now we added a bit of space. Now another tool that we can do, we can use here, and I think it's a bit more adequate just for the purpose of building this design, because it's a little bit more manageable by adding some space on the outside of the on the inside of the container, actually not outside. So in this section, we can go ahead and put some values here. So let's go ahead and put 8%. And then we can just click apply to all sides. It's going to add it to all sides. We can then go here and just resize it a bit. We can go here and just resize it a bit more. There we go. Now that we have it fit, now what are we missing? Well, this circle is a bit too small. So we can always just click here. I think it's always easier when the element is so small to use on the layers panel to select it. So we have here our basic shape. It has a unique size, right? We can also, right now it's set to advanced sizing. We can also go back to our tool here. You can see it says mixed. Whenever it says mixed, it means that it's using also some more advanced responsive properties. So we can go back and say scale proportionally. Right now it's set to 5 pixels. Let's set it to 10. And as you recall, this is set, the value is actually coming from the editing size, right? We're doing some sort of calculation here based off the editing size. And that's it. Now we have our design. All the changes I make on the lower break part are not affecting my desktop. I can continue to make this maybe a bit larger even, and it's not going to affect the other breakpoint. Great, so now we have two sections. I showed you the new stack, which is really going to give us a lot of power to position things a bit better and, you know, have a more precise design there. So now we're going to work on one of the newest features that gives you a lot of power, as opposed to the grid that you were used to on Editor X. Has a lot more features that will help you quickly lay out your section. So if you don't recall, a grid actually allows you to grab an area and divide it into separate areas. So for example, here we have one big area. I can click on this button here that will give me different, it's divided into two columns, or I can click here to add a cell to the right, and it will just basically divide it in half, right? Now we have two different areas. What about if I want to have now three different areas? I have one on the top, one on the bottom, one on the right. We can always also resize them, by the way. We can also just play around with the sizing however we want. Let's just put it back to the center how it was before. And now we can also divide, including here. Now, the cool thing about this super grid is that you can actually add a background to each individual cell. Why? Because each cell actually is a container. So you can see here that each cell can have their own unique background. We can continue playing around with this here and just set the background that we want. Let's go ahead and add some of the cell content in order to get the proper design that we want. So I'm just going to drag and drop this into here. We're going to stretch it just a bit. Let's just stretch here. We're going to do another cell here, stretch it on the background. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and add this one to here. Okay. Now we're missing one more, which is this one. And for those of you that aren't aware about the stretch, basically what we're doing is we're just stretching it across the, the space of the parent. And you can actually find it by going to here on responsive behaviors as well. Click on stretch. And yeah, as you may have guessed it, what's happening behind the scenes is that we're just basically just stretching on the background. You can see it's docked to all sides, so it's just going to be stretched basically. Or in some cases, you can also do 100% width, 100% height of the parent as well. Now, very cool thing about this new grid is we can actually select cells, multi-select cells. Let's just say, for example, this one here, we're going to select this cell, and we're going to select this cell, and we can swap them around, right? We can select different cells and just swap them with each other. You can see how they will adjust. Again, it's very easy to use. You can always delete cells, and the cells will automatically adapt and fill in the space that was removed from before. Now, let's just take a look and see what it looks like on tablet and then on mobile. Now, on tablet it looked okay, but on mobile it's starting to look a bit, cramped, right? We have the text that is not fitting inside. Maybe the order of the grid cells could be better, or just the spacing. We can go ahead and just fix it by ourselves, right? But there's another tool here that's really new to Wix Studio called Responsive AI. Responsive AI will read your section, will understand the layout, and will basically relay out your section. If you can apply directly to a specific breakpoint like mobile, or you can generate for all breakpoints. When we generate for all breakpoints, it's going to recreate the structure of the site of the breakpoint. Can add containers, a lot of other things. In this case, I only want it for mobile, so I'm going to click on only mobile. When we do mobile, it's just basically going to grab our structure and just change the layout. So we're going to see how it's going to read our design here. It's going to start making some changes. You can see now it's changing to rows. That's it. Great. So now we have our layout. That's it. So it really fixed my layout a bit here. So all we need to do, right, we can always make changes to the layout after it's been adjusted by the AI. So I can go here. I have some gaps here. I want to get rid of this white space. Let's just set it back down to 0. That's it. There we go. So now we have our design for mobile as well, for tablet, and for desktop. Now, if you're familiar with the grid on Editor X, you may be thinking about what happened to the old grid. I like the old grid. Or maybe you want to take advantage of both, right? You want to use this grid and maybe you want to apply the other grid in order to have a little bit more precise control and set the values yourself. So we actually still have the Editor X grid, or the CSS grid as we call it, available for you. Now, some disclaimer I have to give is once you switch to the CSS grid, you can't go back to editing on this grid in the way that we're editing now. It will go back to using the grid options that we had from previous grid. So let's go ahead and click on switch. And let's see here, switch to CSS grid. And you can see we'll automatically switch back to CSS grid. You can see we're using all the different values. We have here FR units. We have all the different values we can set. But in essence, it's a very straightforward process, right? We have all the different rows, columns. You can still add new columns, add new rows, do whatever you need to do in order to get the design that you need. So I really recommend, if you do want to use this CSS grid, try to first start with the super grid that we were using earlier and then make the switch. Because the super grid really makes it really easy to set up the layout, the base of the layout that you need. Great. So now we're going to go ahead and start talking a little bit about interactions. Before we start with interactions, just like we did for the grid, we're going to go ahead and just add our first design here of basically our latest design that we have from our projects. We're going to go to assets and we're going to add a preset that I already have. Oops, I meant to add it below the title. So let's go ahead and just right click, select, move down. Great. Now that we have it there, we're going to go ahead and just see this image. And maybe we want to add some sort of interaction to it. Now, in Wix Studio, we've added a lot of different types of interactions you can take advantage of and use across your site. You can use entrance interactions, which runs only once. So for example, here we'll do a reveal. This reveal function will basically just, if we go to preview and we scroll down, you will see that it will run once and never runs again. So it just runs on entrance basically. We also have, we can delete it now for a moment, remove. We also can add a hover interaction, which we'll talk about in a second. We also have the click interaction. And then we also have the scroll interaction. Now for scroll interaction, we can go ahead and add a reveal just like we had it for the entrance. But the key difference here is that the scroll interaction actually runs based off my scroll position. You can see how it goes back and forth between the interaction start point and the end point of the interaction. Now, let's go into the actual settings of this interaction. Let's go here. We can go here and select edit and select adjust animation. Now, here we can select the direction. Each individual preset that we have has its own settings. But let's just say for here, we want to set it to start from the right. Animation area basically reflects to what is your scroll position right now on the page, when it stops, when it starts and ends the animation. So the moment when this image comes into the page, or right now you can see the animation starts. And then the moment we're at 50% of the scroll, that's when the animation ends. So if we were to make this, let's just say 12%, right? When we get to 12% of the scroll area, the animation has already ended. If we were to put it at 80, or let's just say around here, 81, and we scroll down, you can see that it's going to take a lot longer because by the time we get to 80% scroll, that's when the animation ends. In this case, I'm going to leave it at 50%. And just like that, we have an interaction. So it's a very quick interaction. We can also add other types of interactions. One of the very famous scroll interactions that everyone loves is our parallax effect. We can add some parallax. And you can see here when I go to adjust, it has different settings, right? We have a speed setting. Now I can maybe just make it just a bit, right, a bit slower, or maybe let's just do like this, 0.2. So now when we scroll, let's just wait for it to load. Now when we scroll, you can see how it has a bit of a parallax effect. It's kind of moving down at a different rate than our background. So it's a cool thing to use, across different designs, to across your page, to give you like a nice scroll effect. Let's go ahead and add the rest of the projects by adding a repeater. For those of you that aren't super familiar with the repeater, repeater gives us the opportunity to have a specific design across multiple items that is, reused. But the content of the items can be different. So let's go ahead and add it. Now we've added this repeater to the page. Just again, as I was saying, we can always just click on this image and resize it across one item, and it will be applied across all items. Something new that we have on Wix Studio is that now we could actually have A/B patterns for our repeaters. What does this even mean? Well, if we go to repeaters, we can see here we have this toggle set A/B pattern. So this means every other item can have a different design. So for example, here we have a 1 and this. You can see that the same design is being applied to every other item. So these are the A items and these are the B items. This is just because it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to just remove it for now, this option. Something to keep in mind whenever you go from A/B pattern, right? I remove it. I'm going to get this message and it's going to go away and apply the A design that we had earlier. So that's it. We're going to go ahead and connect our CMS or our data collection to the site. I've already uploaded beforehand. If you're not super familiar with collections, it's basically we can upload data to use across the design of our website, or even store data if we need to for whatever logic or the purpose of the website is. But in this case, we're actually adding data here to connect it to our repeater, so that way it populates the data. You have all the titles, the numbers, all the different information we're going to use. So let's go ahead and connect it real quickly. And how do we connect it? Well, we need to actually go to and add what we call a data set to the page. So data set, just clicking here on add content elements. We're going to go to data set here. Data set allows us to connect the design to the data, basically. So now we've added the data set. When I go now to my repeater here, let's go ahead and make sure we're clicking on the repeater. We have the option to connect repeater to a data set. The data set, again, the data set's connected to the data. So now we can see all the different options of what we can connect to it. So we have this text here. We can go ahead and choose to connect to the data set. For this text, we have the description. You can see how now it will start to populate the data. And go back here. We can even go to each individual text. So it's really cool because now all the data connections you have are actually inside the inspector. Here is our title. We can go here. This is a number. We can then connect the image. Very fast and easy, right? We're not going to connect the tags just because of time purposes, but you kind of should get the idea here. There we go. Let's just go to dataset settings, and maybe add a sorting just to make sure things are going to be sorted. Where's our order? Here we go. Just to make sure things will be in order. So you can add sorting filters. There's a lot of different options. When we go into preview, you will see that the design will appear with the data that we have. So great. So it really makes, creating a data binding site really easy to build on Wix Studio. Now, I want to create a quick interaction for hover state. How do we do this? Well, I can have I want these tags to disappear on load, and then when I hover over the item, I want the tags to appear, to just kind of fade in or something. So in order to do this, I can go into my design of these of the container here, and I can go to adjust here all the way at the bottom. Our opacity right now is set to 100%. You can go ahead and set it from 100% to 0. And this will basically just hide the items, these tags from our view. Then we can go to the item because we want the item itself, the container of the this card to be basically the trigger of the interaction. So now I can go to interactions, go ahead and go into hover interactions, click add. And now we're going to go ahead and we can select custom. I want to create a custom interaction. I can click on new custom. Now when I go to new custom, it puts us in this, custom interaction mode where we can, play around with the different values. We have all these different design options, adjusting options of what we can do. Just like we did before, we're going to add opacity 100%. And this is what's going to basically happen when the interaction happens. It's going to set the opacity back to 100%. We even have timing controls here, easing controls. So there's a lot of different options here. Cool. There we go. And now when we go into preview, let's just take a look and see if we have the interaction set up. There we go. Animation 4, which is our new animation. When we have our card set up here, there we go. We have our fading effect. So it's very quick and easy to set up this type of interaction. And yes, without any single line of code. Moving on, we're going to add one more section before we get to our footer. We're going to go ahead and add a show reel. Now, for the show reel section, we actually want to, I'm going to delete the one right above just to make it easier for us. For the show reel section, we want to add, make the section itself fit the height of the screen. Well, in our presets for responsive behaviors, we actually have the option fit to screen. When I click fit to screen, you will see that the edges, the top and bottom edges of the screen of the section actually fit right on top of the screen, right perfectly, actually. And so let's go ahead and add our video here. So I'm going to go click on add elements. We're going to go to our media, and we're going to go ahead and click on final reel. We're going to stretch it here on the background. We're going to go ahead and click on this section again. I want to add a bit of a background color. Now, there we go. Something very important, since we've added, this background color, I want to show like the borders. We used this before, but let's add it one more time. We're going to add 4% margins on, paddings on all sides. Remember, padding is the container pushes, the content inside. And the interesting thing about this, right, we've stretched this video, and because there's padding, the padding creates this kind of white space around it. Great. So now we have this there, and that's it. Now it fits. So if I go to preview, just so everyone can see, if I change the height of my screen, you can see how the video also changes because the section itself is collapsing according to the height of my screen. Very important about this, right? We have kind of like this top bar that's a bit in the way. It's always important to remember that every responsive behavior is built up off of, responsive units. So you can always go to advanced sizing. We can see how it's, right now because we fit to screen, it's set to 100 VH or view per height. And if you recall in responsive design, view per height actually refers to the area of the visible area of the screen that shows your website. So in this case, it's set to 100%. If we set it down to 90, you will see that it will actually now fit a little bit better, our video in the screen. So it fits a lot better now. Great. Our last section is going to be our contact section. Now, in order to add this, I've already pre-designed the section, but we're going to add that running text or the ticker that we have for the text to make it run and loop and, display this way. So I'm going to go ahead and just drop it into place here. It's going to add our text. Before we add our animation, I want to talk about something that's very important when it comes to interactions. you can see how the container of the text is actually a bit larger than the actual page, right? It's kind of falling outside, but it's not displaying this extra content. Why doesn't it display? Well, the page itself has a setting called overflow content hide. This will make sure that no matter what, whenever we're showing, the content is larger than the page itself, it will clip the content or crop it and make sure it only shows, what fits inside the page. If we set it back to show, you will see that it creates kind of like this horizontal scroll on the page, and the actual text is actually visible now. So it's important to remember this, that you may want to use overflow hide if it's not set up already. And overflow settings can be set up for a section, per container. There's a lot of different options there. Now for this text, it's a very quick, easy interaction that we're going to set up. We can go to interactions here. You can click on loop. You have a lot of different types of loop interactions. For this one, I want kind of like this ticker where it just kind of keeps on running and running and running. And that's pretty much it. You have, of course, like options of duration, delay, and all these other things, but I think this is the setting I wanted. Great. Last things last, we're going to add a very famous container from that we used on Editor X called the layouter. If we add it here on the screen, I'm just going to stretch it. There we go. The layouter itself can be used in a very similar way to grid in some cases. It uses a different technology in the background. If you're familiar with responsive CSS, it's using flex boxes. So it's a bit of a different type of container. But there's the important thing about responsive design is many ways to achieve the same exact design with different types of containers and different types of units. In this case, let's just make this section a bit more condensed. There we go. One of the cool things about using a layouter is I can go to this individual item. Let's just say here, this item, go into advanced sizing for this item. And then we can set a minimum width. I can go ahead, the minimum width of this is 500 pixels. So whenever this reaches a point where it's less than 500 pixels, you're going to see how it will adapt the design. Now, look at my breakpoints here. When I'm resizing my screen here, the breakpoint is not changing, only the layout changes. This is one of the powerful things about the layouter. The layouter is able to adapt the layout of the content inside to different layouts within the same breakpoint. This is something that on a grid you really can't do. On a grid, you set up the value of the layout, the way it looks, according to the entire breakpoint. You can't make it break on a specific point. So this can really give you a lot more power. Now it's a bit more of a advanced tool for layouting, but I really recommend it in some cases whenever you need it. So great. So this concludes our site build on Wix Studio. I think we're gonna take some questions now. So Aaron, off to you.
Thanks, Sebi. That was in-depth as always. We're now going to cover a few of the popular FAQs that come up in these sessions. So let's dive into the first question. If my section is set to a specific responsive behavior, can I still control the exact measurements of the elements in it?
So great question. Basically, every responsive behavior is basically grabbing, it's a package of multiple things where we're sort of configuring for you the docking settings, we're configuring for you the sizing settings, and different things that will make this specific behavior work for the component you're working with, right? Because different components might have different needs in order to create the behavior. So in an essence, you can always modify this responsive behavior by going specifically to advanced sizing and changing it. And you can always switch back as well and play around with it and get the values that you need. So yes, you can always use advanced sizing to any element, even after you've applied a responsive behavior. It will show you what the responsive behavior should look like, but it won't limit you to using only these options, basically. So yes.
Thanks, Sebi. That's great to keep in mind. Can I work on a different canvas size other than 1280 pixels?
So yes, you can always work with a different canvas size. I like to work with 1280. Some people may like to work with 1001. Something very important that you should keep in mind is about the width, right? Here we see the width here and all the values with the asterisks. As you change the editing size, because the values are proportional to the editing size, whenever you change the editing size, these values will also change. Take a look here. When I go here back to 1280, you can see how the values all increase because, again, it's proportional to the editing size.
Great, that's really useful. Thanks. What is your recommendation for docking if we are using scale proportionally behaviors?
Great question about docking. Now, docking, in general, when you're scaling proportionally, you don't really need to be so on top of it. But it's still important to keep in mind how docking works. I really recommend, because sometimes you might need to make small adjustments and just to get the right behavior here. For example, you might want to dock something to the bottom because you want to have it, a different way. Let's just say maybe you have an override on mobile or tablet. So you may want to take advantage of docking, but in scale and proportion, you typically don't need to be so on top of it because you're just positioning things on their place and it will keep its place according to where you dock it. And remember, the scaling packages also set up your docking behavior. So this is an important thing to keep in mind.
Awesome, thanks. What elements can be stacked? And specifically, can I stack multiple stacks together?
Great question about stacking. Now, stacking in the new stack that we have, we can always stack things horizontally and vertically. And basically, any element can really be stacked. You can stack images, text, buttons. You can stack vector art, whatever you need to have it, inside of a container that keeps a consistent distance away from another element. You can put it in a stack. And yes, you can have stacks inside of stacks, just like we did here. And it's a normal thing. It's not like, it's a normal to put things stack inside of a stack.
That's a really cool feature. Thanks. Can I still use the layout or layouting tool?
So the layouter tool, as I showed earlier, we still have it available here. And, has all the, other great tools. You can scale things proportionally, and, you still have all the different layouts available for you here that we can reuse as well. And yes.
Really good to keep in mind. Thanks. What is the difference between text scale custom and auto?
Now, great question about the scale. Just to touch up on it a bit more. So here we have this text. Right now, the font size is 66, and again, it's proportional to our screen editing size. We can set a maximum minimum here. This is because the text is set to auto. Auto always uses the editing size as a means of calculation. If you set to custom will take, basically it won't use the editing size. It will just, you create a range based off your maximum and minimum value. So you can set a maximum, my maximum is 100, let's just say 120 pixels, or just say 120. And it will automatically reset the value based off of whatever we set here. So it's a bit of a different logic. You can use either or, whatever you're more comfortable with. However, I do think the auto tends to be a little bit easier for me. Great. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time. I really look forward to seeing your designs on Wix Studio. And thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Great. Thanks, Ebi. And that pretty much covers it for our introductory demo. I hope you found this session helpful in giving you the knowledge base you need to start creating on Wix Studio. Remember, if you want to learn more about what we covered in this video, then check out Wix Studio Academy. Also, if you have any questions, then make sure to sign up for our community forum at forum.wixstudio.com. Until next time, see you soon and keep creating.